You know this story. A soldier tries to sail home from a war. It takes him 10 years, and a sea full of monsters, witches, and one furious god does everything it can to stop him. His name is Odysseus, and for almost 3,000 years he has been treated as a character, a brilliant lie, a poem. But in the 1870s, a businessman named Heinrich Schliemann took a shovel to a hill in northwest Turkey. He was chasing another poem, the story of Troy, the city where Odysseus supposedly fought. Everyone knew Troy was a fairy tale. Then Schliemann's diggers hit stone walls, burned layers, and the ruins of a real city that had been destroyed, rebuilt, and destroyed again. Troy was real. Not the wooden horse, not the gods on the walls, but the city underneath the legend was a genuine Bronze Age fortress, and later clay tablets from the Hittite Empire even name a place called Wilusa, the same name the Greeks knew as Ilios, as Troy. The war behind the myth may have truly been fought. So here's the question that should keep you up tonight. If the city was real, what about the man who sailed home from it? Think about the stories that shaped you, the ones you were told before you were old enough to question them. You still carry a few of them. They quietly tell you who your people are, where you came from, what to fear when the lights go out. Somewhere in the world, right now, someone believes a story so completely that they would build a shrine to it. That impulse is not new. It is one of the oldest things your species does. And on a small, rocky Greek island, archaeologists just found the proof. The island is Ithaca. In the Odyssey, it is the home Odysseus spends 10 years trying to reach. For 2 centuries, a ruined complex in its northern hills has carried a strange nickname, the School of Homer. Nobody could say what it really was. Then, in findings announced in 2025, a team led by Professor Janos Lolos of the University of Ioannina re-examined the site and started reading the writing on the tiles. One roof tile carried an inscription. It was dedicated in ancient Greek to Odysseus. Another was stamped with his name in a form that means "of Odysseus," marking the ground itself as belonging to him. Nearby had been found a small bronze bust of the hero. Piece by piece, the site revealed itself. Not a school, but a sanctuary, a shrine, a place the ancients called the Odyssean, where people came to worship a man from a poem. Now hold on, because this is where the truth turns stranger than the fantasy. This does not prove Odysseus was real. No archaeologist claims it does. There is no skeleton, no throne, no signature. What the tiles prove is something harder to shake. Real people for more than 1,000 years climbed that rocky hill and left offerings to a character. The cult began around 300 years before the Common Era, roughly 5 centuries after the Odyssey was composed, and a full 1,000 years after Odysseus was supposed to have come home. They were not honoring a fresh memory. They were worshiping a story that had become, to them, completely real. Sit with the size of that number. 1,000 years. Longer than the gap between you and the first knights in armor. That is how long a single poem stayed alive enough to pull pilgrims up a hill. And the strangeness does not stop at the shrine. It reaches into the sky. Here is something a poem should never be able to do. It should not be dateable. A myth floats free of time. That is the whole point of a myth. But buried in the Odyssey is one eerie moment. At the instant Odysseus finally returns and takes his revenge, a seer cries out that the sun has been blotted from the sky, and darkness covers the earth at midday. For centuries that was read as pure drama. Then, in 2008, 2 scientists, Constantino Bicuzis and Marcello Magnasco, asked a reckless question. What if it was not drama? What if it was an eclipse? They took the astronomical clues scattered through the poem. A description of Venus, a new moon, the position of certain stars. They ran them forward and backward through the real sky. If those details described a real day, they argued, that day was the 16th of April, in the year 1178 before the Common Era. The same rough window as the traditional fall of Troy. That should have been impossible. You cannot put a date on a fairy tale. And most classicists remain deeply skeptical because the clues are faint, and a poet may have simply written a striking image with no eclipse in mind. It could be pure coincidence. But the details are there in the text, and the sky on that ancient day really did go dark. The poem and the heavens point, however faintly, at the same lost afternoon. So what actually happened here? Maybe there was a chieftain 3,000 years ago who sailed off to a real war and clawed his way home. Maybe his story grew, singer by singer, night after night around the fire, until the man disappeared into the myth. The way a face wears smooth on a coin passed through too many hands. Or maybe there was never one man at all, just a name that people needed so badly to be real that they carved it into stone and prayed to it for 1,000 years. Either way, the line between history and legend is not a wall. It is a fog. And people have always walked straight into it, offerings in hand. Which leaves one last question hanging in the dark. If a story can pull real pilgrims up a real hill for 1,000 years, how much of the history you trust was once just a story too good to let die? You know this story. You just never knew how much of your world might be standing on it. If that cracks something open in your head, there is more where that came from.